Uh, Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello. Thanks for everybody who's logged on so far. I see we've got a couple people coming in still. But thank you, everybody, for joining this evening. We're 7 o'clock right on the dot. In respect for everybody's time, and we appreciate everybody joining, we're going to jump right in and we're going to get started here. Um, and we'll have some people jump in as we go. But again, good evening. Thanks so much to everybody for coming. My name is Jordan Glaser with Remax Realtron and Jordan Glaser Real Estate Team, and want to start off and thank everybody for joining us tonight. For those of you who have joined us on our previous couple of seminars that we've done, thanks so much for joining, and thanks for coming back. If you weren't with us on our first, we've done a couple so far this year that you can go log on to my social media or YouTube, and you can find replays of that and you can watch. We did our first one of the year was for people thinking about selling who haven't sold a house for a long time or were first time sellers, and what to do and how to navigate the waters of selling a property. The second one we did was preparing your property for sale in the spring market, which finally the weather is starting to act as the spring market, and things are starting to shape up into some nice weather. So we're in that spring market now, and we're rolling. So if you didn't make it to either of those, you can check out, like I said, YouTube, and you can go back and watch those, or shoot us a message later on and we can send them over to you. And today we've got another topic that I get a ton of questions on all the time, so I thought it would be a great idea to talk about it in this seminar, and to help get the best answers and the best information for you all as we talk about it. I've brought on tonight a great friend of mine, an expert in his field, Mr. Jonas Rubinoff, who is a real estate lawyer with Rubinoff Law. So Jonas, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Looking
Good.
forward
Thank
to
you.
doing
Thank
this
you
with
so
you.
much for joining, for taking the time to join us tonight. And so what I thought that we would do is, like we have here, real estate and the law. We're going to talk about what you need to know and the lawyer's role throughout a real estate transaction. People always ask, what do I need a real estate lawyer for? Can I use a regular lawyer? And there's a ton of different law questions that always come up into play. So what Jonas is going to do, he's going to go through some of those key kind of factors and details. We've got a little bit of a presentation, and then we can answer some questions. We do have a Q&A box, so if you have a question, you can pop it in there and we'll get to it. But we're going to go through and hopefully we'll answer a lot of the questions you have. I have some questions that I've noted of the most common that I get a lot, that we'll go over. But yeah, we'll just go through that. We'll answer some of those questions, and see where the conversation takes us. Before we jump into that, as everybody always asks, and the most common question every day is what's going on in the real estate market. So I thought I'd just give my quick 2 cents as to where we are right now, as we're end of April. Like I said a minute ago, spring market is upon us. Things are starting to pick up. Things are starting to move. The big question is what's going on and how are all of these different factors going on in the world affecting our real estate market right now? There are so many things outside of real estate happening, whether it's tariffs and Trump, or elections here within Canada, interest rates. All of these things are big questions on people's minds that they're asking all the time. So I'll say to attack the three main factors. Interest rates we'll start with. Last week, Bank of Canada announced that they are not reducing rates this month or this time around. They're going to hold things steady, which I think is fine. I think it's a good sign. It's showing some stability. I think that as we move through into the summer, I expect that we'll probably see a few more reductions and some changes in that. But the fact that rates have come down, we're seeing fixed rates now, almost across the board, whether 2, 3, 4, 5 year fixed under 4%, which is great. That's back into a good, healthy interest rate range. In terms of our elections, we're almost there. We're 5 days out from elections here in Ontario. It's been a talking point a lot that I get. Hopefully, once we get through that, things will settle down. That item will be off the table, and hopefully, we'll have some, at least consistency in what's happening in our country, and we can get moving past that point. And then the Trump and the tariff topic. I actually just saw an article, something popped up on my phone about an hour ago that he is now easing his position on that. Whether that's the case or not, we'll have to live to see because that changes on an hourly and a daily basis. But hopefully, some of that talk, we've kind of been accustomed now to the talk for a lot. So hopefully, it's not as big of a surprise depending on what happens. So I don't see it being too big of a factor, especially here in the core of the city. If you're in some outskirts towns that are really reliant on, the steel industry and the auto industry, definitely have bigger effects there. But overall, I think we've got a good, healthy market here. Things are starting to move. Transactions are starting to pick up slowly. I think prices are steady and stable. We're not seeing major swings up or down, which is what I expect throughout the year. So I think we're just in a pretty stable, healthy market, and I think we're on a good trajectory to get through a lot of these items and move past that and keep things rolling. I think the big tell for this year, real estate wise, and how the year is whether transactions will pick up a little bit. But even in the last week to two, I've started to see a lot more new listings come to market, and a lot more stuff coming out. So I think that's a good telltale sign. Um, Jonas, what do you think? You're usually a step behind me in terms of what you see because we see the deals from my end, and then they come across your desk for closings. What do you think? Do you see kind of the same sort of
I see.
thing that I see?
It was quite interesting. In January, it was actually a fairly busy January. And then when Trump started with the tariffs, you saw a huge slowdown in the market.
Yeah.
Uh, February was incredibly slow. March was also a slow month. Things have definitely picked up in April. And then May is also not looking too busy, but I mean, sort of a similar month till April. Usually, as we get into May, June, July, August is when the volume really increases for real estate transactions. So we're not seeing that trend yet. I think there's a lot of people sort of on the sidelines and don't really know what to expect and are scared to make a move, whether it's buying or selling. So hopefully things will normalize with Trump and these tariffs and a new government in power, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have a busy spring. So
Yeah.
fingers
Absolutely.
crossed. Fingers crossed. Looking forward to a busy. That's what we're projecting. So
Yeah, for sure. I think so. And we'll see as the next month or two come, we'll see how that spring market really shapes up as we get into June
yeah,
and July. So
exactly.
with that said, let's jump right into why we're here. Let's jump into real estate and the law. I'm gonna hand the floor over to Jonas. He's gonna take us through some of the points that he has and kind of the role of the lawyer in the transaction and things like that. And I'll pop in with some of my questions and
Yeah.
as we go.
Feel free to interrupt. I prefer when I present to be more of a dialogue versus me just standing up or sitting down and speaking. So feel free to ask questions or interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't be shy. You know that.
Yeah. I'll do a quick introduction just to let you know a little bit about us. As Jordan said, our firm is called Rubinoff Law. We're a team of 3 lawyers and about 8 law clerks. We do a large volume of real estate transactions, and we're a boutique firm, meaning we only do real estate. So our 100% of the focus of our firm is real estate law. We're located in Thornhill, Ontario. However, because during and after COVID, we're allowed to sign up clients virtually. So our business has expanded across Ontario. So real estate is provincially regulated and is confined to the province. So post-COVID, allowing us to sign up clients virtually has really opened up the borders for us to act in all of Ontario.
So let me jump in quickly. I'm going to start right now. So before COVID, if I was closing a real estate transaction, I'd have to come and sit with you in your office and we would have to sign all the paper and everything in person, correct?
Exactly. So we had an obligation to verify identification in person, and we
Right.
also had an obligation to sign statutory declarations in person as well. So
Right.
those 2 things were changed. The legislation was changed, allowing us to virtually, which I'll talk about more
Okay.
shortly, but virtually confirm identification as well as sign statutory declarations remotely.
Cool. All right.
And I can tell you, which is interesting, 99% of our client signups are virtual.
Yeah, no, it's, I
A
mean,
lot
similar
more.
to transactions for us, right? We're doing a lot of stuff digitally signing as well. So
Yeah, and it's a lot more convenient for clients. So instead of taking a day off work, they can just do it on their lunch. And we're obviously flexible. So after hours or weekends, we can offer appointments as well. So,
cool. All right.
all right. This is our contact information. All of it can be found on our website at www.rubinofflaw.com. As I said, we are a boutique real estate law firm, so we focus on residential and commercial real estate, meaning purchasing real property, real estate, property sales, and mortgage refinances. Same thing with commercial. We also have a mortgage enforcement practice as well. We act for a lot of private lenders, and we also enforce mortgages if there's default under those mortgages.
Okay, cool.
And we offer incorporation services as it relates to real estate. A lot of our commercial clients, when they do purchase properties, do buy them in corporation. So we offer that service as well. Why us? Expertise. Like I said, we have 3 lawyers over 70 years of experience. Um, we are experts at what we do. Like I said, we do only focus on real estate. And I will touch on my presentation, but a lot of lawyers you'll see have general practices. Real estate is incredibly specialized, and there's a lot of little nuances and things you need to know. And I think, in my opinion anyway, if you're going to practice real estate, you only should be practicing real estate. We're very client focused. As you know, with how I practice and how I am, I'm involved with every transaction. I meet with all the clients. I'm involved if there's an issue. You can call me, my cell phone, text me anytime, any day, and we're results driven. We get things done. We deal with the issues as they arise, and we're proactive. And we always aim for a smooth transaction and keeping the client in the loop, which is very important to me. Ontario real estate law and what you need to know. So navigating Ontario's real estate market requires more than just finding the perfect property. It demands a thorough understanding of the legal landscape, and lawyers do play an important role, as well as obviously realtors and mortgage brokers and agents as well. It's important that the lawyer, the realtor, and the 8 mortgage agent brokers all work together to ensure a smooth transaction and closing for the clients.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people don't realize a lot of the time is that the three of us, you as the legal, me as the agent, and then the mortgage broker, once we have, a sale firmed up or even in conditional periods, we have a bunch of communication that goes along behind the scenes between the three of us in terms of, you know, transferring documents to each other, getting information to each other to make sure that we can um, manage whatever is going on, whether, like I said, whether it's waiving conditions or, you know, dealing with money or whatever it is. So there's communication that has to be going through the three parties, which,
Yeah, absolutely. And even if issues arise, it's always my preference to reach out to the realtor or broker first, mortgage broker, and see if we can resolve it between the three of us versus sort of making the client panic or the other side panic.
yeah, for sure.
So it's always important to work as a team and together because we all at the end of the day have the same objective, and that's completing the transaction and having a happy client. So
Yeah,
just the Ontario real estate legal landscape. So there is certain, like I said, real estate is provincially regulated. Each province and territory, for that matter, has their own legislation with respect to real property in the respective provinces. We have the Land Titles Act, which governs how our registry system works, how we register property and title. We have the Planning Act, which deals with development. um, these are complicated acts, but the point with what I want to show, there's different aspects of things you need to know as a real estate lawyer in order to protect the client and proceed with the transaction. There's obviously the agreement of purchase and sale, which is a legally binding contract, which contains many, at times, conditions and terms that need to be adhered to and followed and reviewed and met.
yeah,
So it's important that a thorough review of the agreement, even if it's provided after, is done by the lawyers. There's legal safeguards, which lawyers will ensure are taken care of, like title insurance, title searches, off-title searches, surveys if they're available, which most of the time they're not, and a thorough review of the documents. So of the closing documents. And then there's municipal regulations too, so zoning bylaws, um, use of land, depending on what the client wants to use the land for. Most of the time it's residential, but sometimes when clients purchase land, they want to build a condo or for commercial purposes. So that's also important to sort of determine. Vacant home tax, local development plans. If they're building a condo across the street, you want to know those things and do your due diligence. Property taxes, we order tax certificates again, which I'll talk about more shortly.
Perfect.
Why legal representation matters in Ontario real estate law. So high stakes. A lot of times when clients are buying property, it's the biggest transaction they'll ever do in their life.
Certainly.
And you want someone guiding you and on your side, especially if problems or issues arise. You want a lawyer on your side who's going to step up and who's going to be there and you'll be able to contact and communicate with. Lawyers identify risks, safeguard your rights, and advocate on your behalf when problems arise, which really is the most important thing. If issues or problems arise, you really need to know how to deal with them. They sometimes become complex and sometimes difficult, and it can go to the 11th hour before the closing of a real estate transaction. And like I touched on, boutique real estate law firm, we only focus on real estate. And in my opinion, like I mentioned before, if you're going to do real estate, you should only focus on real estate.
So let me ask you a question quickly. I get sometimes when we have a client doing a transaction and they say, "Oh yeah, I have a lawyer who's going to help me out with this," and I say, "Is it a real estate lawyer?" And they say, "No, no, but they've helped me out with whatever the different hundred different things a lawyer can help you out with." What would be some of the biggest kind of cautionary things you would say that, or reasons why someone should work with a specific real estate lawyer versus just a general practitioner lawyer?
I mean, I would say a lawyer's main job is to convey a good and clean title. And some of the title searches and reading of the plans and the documents are complex.
Right.
And knowing about certain things like the Planning Act and having a really good understanding of it, which is a very complicated piece of legislation, is
Yeah.
imperative. And if you're not doing it every day and running into the issues every day, and you don't have knowledge of those acts, I mean, it could just be something you just don't know about. And
Right.
and it's easy to make a mistake.
Right. Okay.
It's easy to miss something or not read something properly or do a thorough title search.
Cool.
So it's something that we do every day, that I do every day. It's not something I'm doing once or twice a month,
Right.
and I'm doing it multiple times a day. So again, it's just experience.
It's like the same as I say, the number one question people like to ask is how long have you been selling real estate for? And I say it's not the right question. It's not how long you've been doing it. It's how often are you doing it, right?
Exactly.
Because you could find someone who's had their real estate license for 50 years but sells one house every 3 years. He's not in the game. They're not in the business. They don't
Exactly.
know what's going on in the ins and outs every day of what's happening.
And things are constantly changing, and you have to keep up to date, and new legislation's coming out, and new rules are made, and new case laws coming out. So you really have to stay on top of it in
Yeah.
order to protect the client.
Cool.
So all right. So why do you need a real estate lawyer? In Ontario, only a real estate lawyer can sign a deed or a transfer, so it can convey real property. So on a purchase and sale, you require a real estate lawyer for for solely that reason. So
Oh,
purchase sales, only a lawyer can sign the deed. It used to be
okay.
different, but now under the TerraView, which is our registration system, you do require a lawyer. Refinancing, you have all these companies like First Canadian Title, F&F, who you don't need a lawyer to register a mortgage. But I find a lot of times when those companies are doing the refinance for clients, they're slow, they make mistakes, they don't discharge mortgages, and we're always sort of left cleaning up that mess. Yes, the cost is cheaper. Yes, I mean, there's no involve. Yeah, it's simple process, but you're also waiting longer. And like I said, more mistakes typically happen when one of those companies register the mortgages.
Interesting.
And then complex situations. So complex, I don't know, the facts arise if there's court orders or if it's a commercial transaction that has some difficulties. So with those sort of more complicated transactions as well.
Cool. I didn't realize that a lawyer had to sign off on the transaction when
Yeah,
purchase and
yeah,
sale. That's
purchase
great.
and sale. So they should be doing it for mortgages as well, in my opinion. So. All right, common misconception about real estate lawyers. So you touched on this a bit, but I'll go over it. Things I've
Yeah.
heard over the years. Uh,
Yeah.
people, in my opinion, and I'm biased, obviously, but they don't understand the value of legal counsel. They think it's, even though our fees are very low and competitive, they don't think it's necessary. They just think lawyers complicate things, add unnecessary costs, when in reality, having a good lawyer can actually save you a lot of headaches and problems in the future, and also advise you of certain things as well.
Yeah.
Some people actually, I've gotten phone calls where I'm acting for a buyer and a seller calls and says, I'm doing my sale by myself. I
Yeah.
don't need a lawyer. I can do
Well,
it all myself. It's crazy.
the funniest thing that I see on this page that you have here that I'm laughing inside is the one here where you say my real estate agent can handle everything. Because I get the flip side of it and say I don't need a real estate agent. My lawyer can handle everything.
I think real estate agents are a very valuable member of the team, especially when you're buying and selling. I mean, they know the values of the market, they prepare the agreements, they do the negotiations. I mean, lawyers can never, I mean, we can negotiate an agreement, but we don't know the value of properties. I couldn't tell you what a property's worth, what to list for, what to buy for, if it's a good deal or not. I
Yeah, I mean, we all have our area of this process. Uh,
Exactly. We all have our roles, and that's again, I'll reiterate, it's important that realtors, lawyers, and mortgage brokers all work together.
yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, I hear that a lot. My real estate agent can handle everything. Well, yeah, real
Yeah.
estate agents are great, but you do also need legal counsel to
Yeah.
assist.
I thought it's funny. And then to the point you have in the middle of the I can handle the paperwork myself. So for anybody watching who doesn't know, or a lot of people, a lot of real estate agents don't even know, that some of the rules have changed with representation over the last year and a half or so, with the introduction of this self-represented uh, party in a real estate transaction, which basically means that a buyer, John Smith, can say, I'm representing myself. I don't have an agent. I don't want an agent. And they want to do all of the paperwork and all of the negotiation and everything themselves. Um, so to the point of I can handle the paperwork myself. They introduced this because they thought that this was I guess, an element that people were complaining about or people wanted to do. I mean, in my practice, and you can tell me if you've seen any different, I don't think I've ever seen anybody actually go this route of the self-represented party yet, as it's, as it stands for me today.
No, I've never seen that before, but we do get transactions, private transactions, where the buyer and seller aren't represented by any agents and come to an agreement between
Sure.
the two of them.
Yeah, that I
But
get
I've
it.
never seen, yeah, one party represented and one party not.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously, that's not in the best interest of those parties.
yeah.
So.
And then just to touch on it, because it's the third point you have here, and you kind of alluded to it before, in terms of the lawyers are an unnecessary expense. In terms of the expense, and we don't need to get specific necessarily, but the expense of hiring a real estate lawyer versus saying, oh, I have a generic or like a general practice lawyer who can handle it for me. Does there become a difference there? Are they billed hourly the same, or how does that differ between a real estate lawyer and a, generic practice lawyer?
Generally, I think for them to be competitive, they have to do a flat fee. So they don't charge by the hour. Commercial is different. A lot of lawyers, when you're doing a commercial transaction, will bill by the hour.
No, but traditionally with a residential real estate,
Residential transaction is usually flat fee.
right? Yeah.
And obviously, if there's complications or additional work, like review of a status certificate or in a new condominium and occupancy closing, there's additional fees.
Sure. Yeah. But
But we
traditionally, it's
provide
a flat fee versus an hourly, like most people are used to hearing when
exactly.
it comes to lawyers.
And maybe that's just a misconception people have where they think it's an hourly fee, but it's really just a flat fee. So
I
maybe,
think it's something a lot of people who've never been through it don't know.
mhm.
Because it's something you get a lot, and people think sometimes it can be an absorbent amount of money because, you know, they have the idea of that.
Yeah,
So,
'cause a lot of times you hear lawyers charge for $500 an hour and it
right,
scares people. It definitely scares people. So
right.
so rest assured, we are flat fee. We're happy to provide quotes. We get those turned around pretty quick.
Yeah,
So,
cool. Perfect. Keep rolling.
all right. So lawyers' role in a real estate transaction. So I'll touch on what I think is most important and sort of what our job is. So
Yeah.
a lot of time, I would say the majority of the times when we receive an agreement of purchase and sale, they're already firm or conditional on financing or inspection. Sometimes we do have the opportunity to review agreements of purchase and sale and make comments. So some of the things we do, we check the dimensions of the property. We'll check the owner is who matches with the agreement. We'll check the legal description. We'll also check the clauses and oftentimes when we review, suggest additional clauses as well, depending on the situation with the client.
Okay.
But a lot of times, like I said, agreements come to us, they're firm, although we still conduct a review of that agreement. Obviously, there's conditions and other terms and conditions that will be applicable, that will have to be complied with prior to closing.
Okay.
All right, client protection. So, I mean, our role as lawyers, it really is to protect the client and ensure that they're getting, like I said, which I, in my opinion, is the most important thing, a free and clear title to the property upon transfer and closing.
Yep.
We identify risks, we ensure compliance with the agreement and legislation. We protect against fraud and title insurance. So one of the methods we now use as of January 2024, we have to use this identification program. So every client we meet virtually, and even if we're meeting a client in person, we have to have the client complete, they have to actually scan their face and enter some other information, which actually then uses a bunch of points of information to verify their identification. Because
Right.
because of all the fraud, COVID and pre-COVID, the Law Society has instituted that, and it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good protection for clients, for homeowners, for buyers, to ensure that the folks, clients are who they say they are.
Yeah.
Uh, Title insurance is also another big thing, which I order on all purchase transactions. We call it an owner's policy. It's a one-time fee, also fairly inexpensive for the coverage you receive. It runs for as long as you own the property and it'll protect you against things, in my opinion, the biggest one's fraud. So any title fraud or mortgage fraud, any tax arrears, water arrears, utility arrears on the property, any open permits, any work done to the property without proper permits, and the city comes in and gives a work order. Those are sort of some of the things that title insurance covers.
And so you do that as a standard on every property that you
On
transact.
every purchase, yeah, I won't close a transaction without title insurance.
But that's not the law, I guess, right? That's at the
It's not the
discretion of
law, but if you don't have title insurance, then we'd have to give a legal opinion and it will outdo the cost of the title insurance.
right.
You
Okay.
need an up-to-date survey. You have to do every single off-title search. So
Right. So
title
generally
insurance.
it's like a safety blanket or a safety net to catch just in
Exactly.
case.
Exactly. And I don't want to, I mean, the reason you don't need surveys today is because of title insurance.
Right.
So
Okay.
title insurance will provide protection as in the same way as if you had a survey in front of you. I'm
Okay.
not saying it's a replacement, a good replacement, but it does do the job. Obviously, if you can obtain a survey, that's preferable.
Cool.
And that's another thing. It's kind of a lost art, reviewing a survey, um,
Right.
because you don't see them anymore.
Yeah,
So
it's tough to get if
very,
someone doesn't have it passed along from owner to owner, especially in the city of Toronto, if you don't
yeah,
have
it's very difficult.
chances are they don't either.
No. Very rare do I see a survey these days.
Yeah, yeah.
Due diligence, we conduct very intensive title searches. So we have to make sure there's no encumbrances, liens, court orders, anything on title that could restrict conveying good title.
So let me ask you a question to that. What happens if you buy a house, you have a firm sale on a house, and then you're doing your title searches and everything, and it comes up that there is something on a property. There is a lien or there is something outstanding on a property that say the sellers didn't know or didn't disclose that nobody knew about but is there. What happens?
As part of our job, one of the things we do behind the scenes is send something called a requisition letter. And a requisition letter is a letter to the other lawyer, to the seller's lawyer, setting out all the things we require. And we would set out in there if there's an issue, like an existing mortgage, for example, on or before there's mortgage in favor of CIBC, registered as instrument number 123 is on title on or before closing. Please provide us with the discharge of the mortgage or your undertaking to discharge. If there's a court order or liens, construction liens come up a lot, court orders. Again, as part of the requisition letter, we requisition it and the lawyer has to deal with it. The onus is on the seller's lawyer to deal with it and remove it on or before closing, whether they actually remove it on closing or provide their undertaking to remove it. Or we do a holdback. There's a whole sort of variety of ways we can handle those things.
Right. So
And
there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that a lot of people don't see or realize that
exactly.
you're doing, ensuring that there are no surprises once you get
Yeah,
the keys and you pay all the money for a property.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of times we don't even bring it to the client's attention because we deal with it and it's satisfied on closing.
Right. Oh,
Um,
cool.
if the requisition cannot be satisfied on or before closing, the agreement specify that the agreement can be terminated.
Okay.
Again,
Cool.
everyone has to be acting in good faith. Um,
Right.
Off title, we also conduct off title searches, which a lot of lawyers don't do. For example, on every transaction, we order a tax certificate.
Okay.
It's another $75 to $100 cost. Title insurance does cover something like that if there are arrears. But I take the position that if a client gets a tax bill for $20,000 after closing, they're going to call me and say, why didn't you do your job and make sure the taxes were paid? And then
Right.
it becomes a headache. You have to make a claim on title insurance, and there's usually a cost involved with that. So
Right.
I always like to order tax certificates just to make sure the taxes are cleared.
Cool.
Other due diligence we do, depending on the transaction, we order a building zoning certificate, see if there's any open permits, depending on the price of the house. Also, if we have information that it's a new build or renovation, we will order that as well. And that'll tell you if there's any open permits, work orders, investigations, and whatnot. Also, it's also important to do your due diligence with respect to the vacant home tax. This is a nightmare. A lot of times sellers don't know about it or don't file it. So that time of the year when the deadline comes and we're doing our searches and we find out that the vacant home tax was never filed and the sellers were assessed with the tax, then they have to appeal again. So that creates complications on our end, where we have to do holdbacks or we have to assist with the claim or follow up with the claim or negotiate that with the buyer's lawyer.
Right. So it's added a new level of complication
Yes,
in some cases.
yes. Also on condominiums, you always there's always a condition for status certificate review, or sometimes it's actually reviewed prior to
Yeah.
submitting of the offer. A lot of seller agents will provide it, so you can submit a firm agreement.
Yeah. So to touch on that for a second, because that's, in the condo world, it's a big thing. What sort of things do you look for when you're sent a status certificate for review? Are there certain items that are more important and higher on the list that you need to focus on? Like, what are the main things?
Yeah, so what's important is we always make sure the legal description matches with what's in the status certificate. Especially with condos, sometimes there are mistakes, even how they register them, and
Yeah.
that's a whole other story. But we look for if there's any arrears of common elements. We look that there's no that the reserve fund's healthy. There's no lawsuits. There's no special assessments. So I would say those are sort of the main and important things we look at.
Yeah.
And we
Okay.
provide a nice summary.
Yeah, I know with you guys, you send like a multi-page summary and
Yeah,
you
it's
have your
very
like
detailed.
rules and restrictions because condos have rules, whether it's for pets or it's for rentals or vacancies or you're out of the country for a portion of the time, whatever it is. So you
Yeah,
guys really
so
highlight that for people.
yeah, I call those lifestyle matters. So
Yeah.
smoking, pets, renting. Uh,
Right.
some condos are incredibly strict with those things.
Yes.
Either say no pets, no smoking, no short-term rentals. So that's
Yeah.
all important to point out.
Perfect.
After we conduct our due diligence, we prepare and review the transaction documents. And then we meet with the client to sign, verify ID, explain the documents, go over the accounting, um, go over the trust ledger, the statement of adjustments. I know these terms might be new, but it's all the mathematics of the transaction, how everything
Right.
breaks down. Then we meet, like I said, usually virtually. We also offer in person. Happy to meet in person. And we do that at convenient times for the client. And then finally comes closing day. And closing day, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on. Typically, most clients have lenders, so that we're waiting for funds from the lender. We're waiting for documents from the other side of the transaction on a purchase. And then we have to send the money over to the other lawyer, usually through electronic means. Then we have to register the transaction, and then finally the key exchange, which today is usually done by lockbox.
Right. So the big questions I always get about closing day. Number one, the biggest, like what time do I get my keys at? Right. And I think these days, because things are done electronically more than physically with money transfers and everything, correct me if I am wrong, but closings can be done usually earlier in the day than they used to be 10 or 20 years ago when you had to physically go to the bank to do the deposits and change checks and stuff. Am I
Yeah,
right?
that's true. A lot of times, especially with the banks, the main banks anyway, funds are in our trust account early, so we can send off the funds by wire transfer.
Yeah.
Some banks take a little longer than others. Like for example, TD can take hours for a wire transfer to arrive. Where if we bank with CIBC, so if we sent to RBC, BMO, Scotia, it arrives pretty fairly quickly.
Okay.
I
Perfect.
still like to set expectations. I tell clients mid-afternoon.
Yeah.
And if it's way sooner, I look like a hero. If not, then it is what it is. So uh,
Yeah. And I think I echo the same thing because a lot of people say, well, I want to close both sides of my transaction on the same day.
yes, which again, a lot of it is out of our hands.
Right.
Especially if, which I never recommend. I never
Me
recommend
neither.
buying and selling on the same day. Always suggest getting bridge financing, even if it's for a day or two.
Yeah, just because you're out of control about when the transfer
Exactly.
goes through
Because
finally and
we're waiting for the buyers of the sale property to deliver funds. And
right.
who knows when their lender's going to advance funds and when the lawyer's going to send. So
Right.
it's stressful for everyone.
Yeah.
And I mean, the last thing we want is a client not to have somewhere to stay or somewhere to go. So
Right. Sitting outside a house with two moving trucks full of their stuff and
exactly. And it
nowhere to
doesn't
go.
close. So whenever I see someone buying and selling on the same day, I call the client and I suggest bridge, even
Yeah.
if it's for a day.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I'll talk a bit about divorce, separation, and real estate. I know you wanted me to highlight this. In my practice, we mostly see it with the matrimonial home. So a house that's ordinarily occupied by a family, where there's rights to occupy that home under the Family Law Act, whether or not that spouse is on title or not on title.
Right. Yeah.
So, and the other sort of important thing with this is even if one spouse is not on title in the agreement of purchase and sale, the spouse still has to consent, and they also have to consent with our documents as well.
Right. Yeah.
So when a couple's getting separated, usually there's a few scenarios. One, which recently I had, it was the first time there was a court order where one spouse wasn't cooperating, and we got a court order ordering that one of the non-cooperating spouse wasn't required to sign documents, and that the spouse who was cooperating was able to sign the documents. And that was something that was quite complicated. Just reviewing the court orders, understanding them. You have to register them on title.
Right.
So knowing how to do all of those things are
And
it's labor intensive.
in
And
those cases, I guess you work in conjunction with whatever the lawyers on all the different sides are to
yeah,
for.
the family law lawyers, it's very important that we work with them and speak to them
Yeah.
constantly.
Right.
And then most commonly separation agreements, which dictate the sale of the property and how funds are dispersed. And then also the third, I guess, which we get sometimes is there's no agreement and we hold funds in trust. And it could be years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Before
Okay.
separation or agreement is reached.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, like you mentioned, transaction management, we're coordinating the sale process between most oftentimes two hostile parties, uh, family law councils, and then dispersing the funds, usually paying debt, paying bills, equalizing, so figuring that out. Usually they'll say that it's split 50-50, but then one party gets this amount and the other party gets that amount. So we're sort
Right.
of left
Right.
calculating those amounts.
Right. And and so to as kind of a summary, not just in this sense, but the whole sense, the way the transaction flow goes is the money for buying and selling whatever side you're on, it all goes through you, the lawyer, the two lawyers on both sides.
Correct. Yeah, it flows through our trust account. So we're always sending on the purchase to the seller's lawyer, and then on the if we're the seller, the purchaser's lawyer sending us the funds in trust, and then
Right.
we're responsible to disperse them.
Right. Yeah. Because I get people saying to me, like, when are you going to give me my check? And I said, I don't get the checks.
Yeah, you just get the commissions on a sale that you have to
Right.
return.
Right. We have a check for the balance from deposits and stuff, but different story.
Exactly. Yeah. So lawyers, and that's another way to just safeguard clients' funds that
Right.
they're transacted through lawyers. There's a record, they're
Yeah.
safe, um, and then we send them out to the client electronically.
Yeah.
All right. Key takeaways: engage a lawyer early. A lawyer is an important part of real estate transactions. Complex situations require expertise. So we talked about the divorce issues, separation, title issues, off title issues, when you're dealing with multiple parties as well in a transaction.
Yeah.
Prevention over remediation. So it's always good to hire someone who's experienced and knowledgeable and preventative rather than dealing with mistakes and errors after the fact.
Yeah.
Choose experience, choose a lawyer who does it regularly, um, or just sort of specializes or focuses on real estate and really understand the value that a real estate lawyer plays in the transaction.
Yeah. Which is huge.
Yeah.
So the number one thing that I get and that people don't quite grasp, and I get all the time, and it's a worst case scenario we never like to talk about, but if I sell my house and the deal doesn't close, I get to keep the deposit.
So yes,
So that,
there's always a misconception that if a transaction's not completed per seller, the purchasers don't close or refuse to close, that the deposit is automatically given or provided to that seller. However, that deposit is being held in a trust account, usually by the real estate agent, and
correct.
there's a few ways there's three ways really that can be released, and that's a court order, mutual consent, um, both parties agree, or there's a provision in the agreement authorizing and directing. Like a lot of times when we do extensions, we put in a provision saying if the transaction doesn't close, then the brokerage, we make the buyer sign a direction that the deposit can irrevocably be released to the sellers.
Right.
But really, it's not so simple as just releasing the deposit to the seller if the buyer doesn't close.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, once if there is that, the deposit is there to remediate damages to the seller, not just there for the seller's taking.
Well, it's there for the seller's taking, then you can sue for damages. So,
Right. So if you have a damage,
if,
if you have $100,000 deposit, let's say, and you resell the property for 50,000 less, and you have $10,000 of extra carrying costs, does the seller get the full 100,000?
yes, they would.
Yeah.
Yeah, and be
Okay.
released.
Right. Okay. So it doesn't just automatically go, but it's there to cover the damages.
Yeah, but it's also if you sell it for more, you're entitled to it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So that's I wasn't I thought so. I wasn't 100%, but that's
yeah,
what we're here
yeah.
for, right?
You're entitled to the deposit.
Right.
So
So
it,
hopefully we don't get into those situations. We
no,
never want to get to those,
no.
but
I mean,
uh
the truth is, in my experience, um, 99% of the time it's negotiated,
yeah,
and there's some sort of arrangement arranged between the buyer and the seller for the release of it.
yeah,
Whether it's all of it and you sign a release, or whether it's half of it, or I mean, rarely, at least in my experience in practice, will it go to court. It has. I've seen it. I can count on
yeah,
one hand. Generally, we negotiate.
right. Yeah, I've had in my career probably twice, maybe three times. And same. It's always been negotiated and we figured out a way to get everybody moving past it. So
Exactly. I mean, really, you see it's litigated if you go and you sell it for way less, like significantly less, and,
yeah,
and that makes it worth it.
right.
And I've had that, like I said, I think it's been two or three times where I've seen that
Yeah.
over.
Not common. Everybody always asks about it, but thankfully
Yeah.
not super common and hopefully doesn't
I've
become.
read a lot of cases that have been litigated and where the courts have ordered significant amount of damages,
Yeah.
but never sort of. It's not common, put it that way. At
Yeah.
least from
Per-
in my practice, in my experience. So
Yeah. Amazing. Well, that was the big one that I wanted to end on. So I want to thank you for taking some time tonight to join us and to be with us. I think it was super helpful. It's got a lot of there's so many pieces to the puzzle that lawyers deal with that a lot of people don't realize. There's so much behind the scenes stuff that you do that we don't see on a regular basis. So it's nice to hear it and kind of get a little bit more perspective as to, what's going on behind the scenes that you're doing and the checks and the assurances and everything to make sure that people are making good decisions and are protected. Because, like you said off the top, this is for the majority of people, this is the largest transaction or purchase people will make. And most people don't do it as often as you and I.
mhm.
Uh, so people having the assurance that they're protected and they're covered, and God forbid some worst case scenarios is great. So thank you. Thanks so
Yeah,
much for joining. Thanks
thank
to
you. Thanks for
everybody.
having me.
Of
It's
course.
been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to everybody who's watching. If you have questions on it, like I said, we'll have Jonas's contact info to follow when we send the video out. So if you have any questions or anything like that, I know he's always available
Yeah,
to help
feel free to reach out,
in
email, phone.
in
So
any way he can. And that's it for tonight. So thank you so much again. We'll send out updates later on with the recording of this and also for our next seminar, probably in about 6 weeks or so, and what we're going to talk about then. So Jonas, thank you so much.
thanks
Everyone,
for
thanks so
having
much
me.
for
Thanks
joining.
for coming.
Thank you, and we'll talk to everyone soon.